I think of the impact of Los Angeles. I think of the evolution of Los Angeles. It's been around since 1781. Let me ask you, because I've lived here for over 40 years. I have been to other places, but I've only lived in Los Angeles. What is one of the, if not the number one draw to this city? What is it? The weather. It's the weather, man. You come out here and you get basically what, 300 days of sunshine? Because we probably have about 65 days of rain per year. So, yeah, the rest of that is sunlight. And that's a draw. It's always been a draw since the city was established, since the Spaniards were roaming these parts, you know, and great agriculture. You know, it's kind of interesting to think of the evolution of the industries of LA. At one point, it was farming, oil, movies, and now we have tech, right? That's one of the big industries here in the state of California. But things do change, you know. You think of going from one point where the movies were important. Are the movies still important? Maybe not so much today as they used to be, you know, especially in terms of filming and locations. Think about it. You know, the movies have been around a little over 100 years. You could say that Hollywood was the promotion campaign for Los Angeles. Okay. It was the commercial for LA because at one point, this is where the movies were done before it started to spread in other places like Canada, Georgia, some parts of Texas and other parts. This was the place where the movies were made. This was it. Right. And that was the draw. That's why a lot of your favorite actors like Al Pacino, De Niro, Denzel Washington, a lot of them are from the East Coast. You know, the studios began over there in the late 1800s, early 1900s, and then made their way out here to Los Angeles because they realized, wow, we can shoot anywhere. You got lots of different terrain. The weather is good, which allows for you to shoot year round. Yeah, let's move out there. And here come the studios, and the rest is history. And so then a lot of actors that started in New York would say, okay, I got to go out to LA in order to make it because that's where all the movie studios are and that's where the opportunities are. So there you go. And these movies and TV shows would feature areas of Los Angeles, commercials, movies, TV shows, music videos, a lot of the old stuff. If you want to see the way LA looked in the 70s, the 80s, and the 90s, you watch a lot of those old movies. Watch a movie like Speed with Keanu Reeves, you know, shot in LA, the 105 freeway, the subway or the metro, right? Which wasn't finished back then because it started up in the plan started in the 80s and then it was finished by the mid 90s. And that was featured in the movie. And so Los Angeles has had to rely on Hollywood, but that's about to change. Okay. That's about to shift because Hollywood, I sense that Hollywood is losing its grip on things. Okay. The rise of the tech age, which we've already seen, we're about, you know, a little over 20 years into the tech age. And that's becoming big or bigger, I should say, because it's about to enter into a new phase, especially with the metaverse coming into the mix, virtual reality in the mix, drones, right? That's a big thing that's going to be in the mix. I'm going to say this is a very crucial decade, the 2020s for Los Angeles specifically. It's a crucial decade all across the US. But for Los Angeles in particular, it's a very important decade. And this is going to be a very busy decade for Los Angeles. There's a lot of events in LA. We already had the Super Bowl, right? And then we got FIFA coming up in 26. And then 2 years after that, you got the Olympics. So if there was any time to promote or to sort of draw people back to Los Angeles, since people left and then people are kind of on the fence in terms of wanting to stay here or not, you could say that the 2020s will be a marketing campaign for Los Angeles, the entire decade. And it's going to impact what people do in terms of living here. Are they going to stay? Are they going to come? It'll impact tourism. Will that continue? Will it be what it was before 2020? Right? The numbers were astounding before 2020. How do I know? Because I worked in the touring industry for 11 years. So going forward, I would say 2020 to 2040. There it is. That will be the big shift of the Los Angeles reinvention, the reinvention of Los Angeles. So it's either going to reinvent itself and reclaim itself as being a place to be, or it's going to lose all of it. And a lot of that will be due to policies and um, expenses, living expenses. It's very expensive to live here, of course. And of course, with that comes the way people do business, where they think, okay, I don't have to move to LA to be in the entertainment business. I can be right here. I don't have to move to LA to do tech. I can stay at home here in Alabama or here in Ohio or wherever. Okay, I can work remotely. So that question is floating in people's minds. It already has been since 2020, especially. That was the big, I guess, reset, if you will, the reevaluation of what it means to go to a place of work. And then with the development that's happening in LA, there's a lot. There's a lot. A lot of these plans were put in place before 2020. When you look at the LA projects, especially with the new skyscrapers, a lot of that was put in place in the 2010s. I'll put some articles in the description box, and I may put some videos in the end screen, like with the expansion of the metro. That's a big deal. Man, this city's going to be different. It might even go back to what it was at the turn of the 20th century, when public transportation was the way to get around. Because at one point, we had the largest train system in the world. And that sort of shifted when the automobile industry took over. Buses and, cars took over. But things repeat themselves. So with these change-ups, you're going to have a new migration. You're going to have a new demographic. At one point, it was all about families, single family housing. That's what it was about. In the early part of the 20th century, when LA was being developed between the 1890s and the early part of the 1900s up until about 1940, this was the thing. Single families. LA was a place where you could raise your family, pursue your religious freedom, and that sort of thing. And it just by happenstance, oil was discovered. Movies came out here, right? So then now that's becoming something else where it's not about families. Is this a place to raise families anymore? Will that be the goal? I mean, you have a lot of mixed use buildings now where you have the luxury apartment, the residence on the top, and then you have the retail at the bottom. You'll have a Starbucks, a Panda Express, or a Ralph's at the bottom, and then, living spaces on the top. And that became common in the 2010s, especially, and that'll continue with a lot of these projects. You can see it. All right. Los Angeles is going to either reclaim its popularity or lose it. What will happen? Now, in terms of your view of LA, some of you are like, LA is very superficial. It's superficial. It's superficial. To a certain extent, and I've said this before, it's the transplants that come here that make it that way. Because a person that was born and raised in Los Angeles, they perceive all of this stuff totally different from a person who comes here from Akron, Ohio. Because a person who came here from Akron, Ohio, they're trying to pursue a dream. They're trying to follow their dreams. They're trying to get those opportunities, man. It's a different mindset. Person born and raised and all of this stuff, it's a little bit of a different approach. Okay? When you talk to someone that grew up in Los Angeles, or someone like who's around my age, I'm a Gen Xer. You talk to somebody who grew up and lived here, they have a totally different vibe. It's different. Okay? It's not as trivial, not as superficial, and not to say that transplants are a bad thing, because Los Angeles was built by transplants. But it's this idea of I got to get mine, quid pro quo, business and opportunity. I'm getting mine, screw you, favors for favors, and that whole idea. The Hollywood life, the lifestyle, luxury and plush. It sort of became this infection here in Los Angeles, and I've witnessed a part of it. But that's not everybody. But will it evolve to a place where it's just strictly business? Because when you look at a lot of these new buildings, these new luxury apartments, right? You look at the style of these buildings, the amenities that they have, and who it will be available to, a certain demographic that can afford it, right? So then it attracts a certain type of person. Will that become Los Angeles? It's no longer about families. Maybe it'll be like Century City. Century City is a small pocket in LA that used to be the backlot to 20th Century Fox, which is now Fox Studios. but it was sold to a real estate developer and became what it is now, sort of a business district, really small, a few skyscrapers, nothing tremendous, but you could easily see in terms of the development, when you look at the plans and the projects and the metro and everything, you can see that Los Angeles may very well become that. Now, will it become New York in terms of the height of these buildings? Our tallest being the US Bank Tower. I used to work there. And, I caught wind of the plans in terms of 15 new skyscrapers over the course of 10 years. It's interesting to think about. That creates a new culture. It's a new culture, a new mindset, the whole artsy, hippie thing that infused its way into Los Angeles. That may be completely gone over the course of the next 20 years. So it's a lot to consider for someone that's thinking about coming here. Pay attention to what's going on, because the 2020s is going to be the big commercial. It's going to be the new commercial for LA. And we've got midterms, 55 candidates for LA mayor. Homelessness is still big. Crime is on the rise. Crime has risen, especially in the last 2 years, which is nothing new. We've had some criminal spikes or spikes in criminal activity, but it really spiked, right? And then there's the new form of criminal activity, frauds and online scams. And then you have drones coming into the mix. There's so much to account for. And the people who moved probably said, you know what? I had enough. The jig is up. I've had enough. Let me go to Vegas. It's right next door. It's only 4 hours. Let me go to Florida. It's the same as LA. It's a coast. I can get a beach somewhat cheaper. Although I think they're on the list of most expensive cities. Miami. Have to look that up. But, Texas is another. Georgia, in terms of the movie business. There's other places, Canada. I don't know. Los Angeles. Do you still love it? You still want to come out? I don't know. I don't know if I'll be here for the rest of my life. I've always said that I didn't want Los Angeles to be my final stomping ground. I've seen the evolution of this place, and I will say the 2020s, based on the plans they have in place, looks pretty interesting. Just, in terms of the change, because I welcome change. I'm not one who disses change, but I'm also not a pro-innovate. I don't have pro-innovation bias. Pro-innovation bias. That's when you think that everything that is new is better just because it's new. I don't come from that camp. There's some things that are new that are cool, and there's some things that are old that are cool, and you just have to find the balance between those two things. And Los Angeles doesn't really have a whole lot of old stuff. It still does, but what will it look like in 2032, 2042? This place is changing so fast, I can't even keep up with it. And, I have that series Where I Grew Up that talks about a lot of this, but yeah, man, the ideas of Los Angeles will definitely be interesting going forward, but pay very close attention to the 2020s.